Doing some Space Cat Solitaire today. I wanted to do this kind of a um, intro here, just because I wanted to make sure that my sound is all good, make sure you guys can hear me and everything. Um, and I also need to hit record on my camera. Make sure that's going. How are you guys doing? I see there's a couple people in the chat here. I've got my notes over here. And make sure my audio is fine. I have about a 14-second delay from what I could tell from the chat to here. So just want to make sure that you guys can hear me. Let me know in the chat if you can or can't, if this is fine. And I will bring up Space Cat Solitaire pretty soon. I think, yeah, and then we'll get out of chill mode here for a little bit. Is anyone even here? My views aren't here. We are going live. We're doing it live. Well, it says I have 5 concurrent viewers, but there's no views on my concurrent list. I wonder if the analytics are weird. What is going on, chat? What is going on, everyone? I have a notification on my phone. Okay, well, it looks like I have some viewers now. 44-second delay, looks like. I don't know what's going on there. That's crazy. All right, so everyone can hear me. Want to make sure everyone can hear me. And if not, say something. Otherwise, I'm going to go into this. So let's bring up our game here. And here we are. Okay, so this is Space Cat Solitaire by Grey Duck Games. I'm gonna go ahead and do my little intro here. My name is Devon. Welcome to Games Over Qualia. If you're new here, we do some game design critique where I do my first impressions, and then in this live stream, what will happen is I'll do my first impressions, and then we'll talk about that with the comments if there's any kind of discussion that you guys have, any comments or questions about that. And then we'll go into the devs' intentions, talk about their answers to my questions that I had asked them. And then we'll talk about that. Then we'll open up for a little discussion afterwards, and then see if we can get into some gameplay. I might be able to do some gameplay. I'm not exactly sure. So this is Space Cat Solitaire. So let's talk about this. Okay, so Space Cat Solitaire is a solitaire game, obviously for Steam, and as you can see in the thing here, in the monitor right up here, it's a self-explanatory game. Well, I guess it's not self-explanatory just yet, because you can't see it just yet. The game itself is very much just a solitaire game. So if you've ever played Free Cell, it's very much like Free Cell, where you have different types you have the tableau. If you've ever played solitaire games, you know what this is. But basically, it's you have the tableau, which is a bunch of stacks of cards that you're trying to stack on the bottom. That you're constrained by certain rules, and then you have to put those cards from the bottom onto the top of little stacks. The differences in this game is there's not a whole lot, but there's some. This one you have to, instead of stacking alternative colors, you have to stack by suit. And in here, suit is actually shown as color, which is interesting. So you have to stack by suit, and you have to go up and down for the stacks on the tableau. And then you have to stack from the working piles from the tableau onto your stacks onto the top. I know this is weird terminology, but that's how solitaire goes. You stack them on the top, which is your 4 different types of suits. And then you have a new suit in here that's called cosmic cards that are kind of suitless. They don't really have a suit, but they're purple colored. And they go from the numbers 0 to 23, I believe. They might be 24 or something like that. So, or maybe 26. Yeah, 26 would make sense because it's double 13. So yeah, so that's basically all it is. That's basically the whole game. It's a lot of detail. I don't know how to say this. There's a lot of detail in the game, and it's very juicy. There's a lot of game juice involved. As you can see, there's a lot of sparkles. The cards are glowy. You know, you're playing in space, so it's a lot of big and bright stuff. It kind of reminds me of Peggle in that regard. But specifically, what I want to get into is I want to get into my first impressions, and I want to talk about how I was just a little bored. So I love Solitaire. If you know me, I mean, Solitaire is a very casual game. It's a very easy game for me to get into, and I use it as a distraction. And I've grown up in the Windows 95, 98 era, where Solitaire was included on computers. And for me, it was really easy to always go into Klondike Solitaire, which was just kind of always there in Microsoft. And as it just hung out there in the program, I could just click on it, bring it up, and play a quick game if I wanted to. It didn't matter where I was, what computer I was using, whether it was mine or anyone else's. As long as it was running Windows, I could play Microsoft's Solitaire, and it was Klondike Solitaire, if I remember correctly. And I'm a little biased because my mom had taught me Solitaire when I was a child and using cards on the table. So I learned it from an early age. So I had already known Solitaire from that point on, and I loved Solitaire growing up. And what's interesting about this, I think, is knowing how to play Solitaire as a game, as a tabletop game, and then taking it and putting it onto a computer, right? So the computer itself is just a digitized version of the game that's there on the tabletop, and that's all it was for me. And when I grew up later, I started having Solitaire on like my phone, but I would never really play it as like a game that I would sit down to try and play. There is this kind of meditative experience that comes from playing something like Solitaire or any kind of single player tabletop games. And I'm not the kind of person who always goes into that kind of state. Usually I like to, play more, more computery, I guess you could say, kinds of games like, what's a good one? Well, Dead Cells is one. Oh, Session. There you go. Session's a good game that I play all the time. That's basically just, sit there, relax, kind of zen out and kind of just play the game, and that's it. So I'm doing this because that's it's my Steam Deck. I always played on my Steam Deck. So that's the kind of way that I've always looked into, I guess, relaxing experiences. And it does seem to me that this game is trying to be a relaxing experience. The thing that I feel a little weird about with this game is that it reminded me a lot of Peggle. Now, if you've never played Peggle, Peggle's an older game that came out, I think, in 2000 or 1999. It's probably more modern than that. But I mean, I'm sure you're familiar with it, but it's basically pachinko. Is that what it is? Pachinko or plinko? I think it's pachinko, where you have a bunch of pegs on a board, and then you shoot a ball, and the ball bounces on the pegs and tries to get to one of the slots at the bottom. The cool thing about Peggle is that you are trying to clear out, a bunch of pegs. So why am I talking about Peggle? So Peggle has this kind of really juicy type of experience. The person who made Peggle was trying to create a pachinko-like experience for the user, but didn't like the rate at which you shot the balls. And so he tried to juice up everything, right? He tried to make it just one single ball at a time rather than pachinko where you shoot multiple balls at once. And instead of trying to get to the bottom, it's about hitting every single peg. So the game Peggle is very, very juicy. It's very, it has a lot of game juice in it. Every time that your ball hits a peg, it plays a musical note, and it goes up every time that you hit another peg. Your character, as you play, or you play as a character, and that character shoots the balls there, and then they each have their own individual powers. You are playing in very fancy, very fantasy-driven areas. It's really weird, but it's a really interesting type of experience. But it's a very juicy game for kind of a boring mechanic, and that's what this game is. Space Cat Solitaire is very, very much Peggle. It very much feels like Peggle to me, where you have this very, very, very juicy look at something that's kind of a regular, kind of monotonous mechanic. And I will say it was, this is a Zen kind of game. It does feel kind of Zen when you're playing that, but it does not feel, but it doesn't feel like it's meant to be anything more than juicy. Now, the reason why I felt a little removed from this game, a little bored, was because there's two different modes in here. The first mode is the mission mode, which you can see playing right here. The mission mode is where you are following kind of a light story forward. And as you're going forward in the story, it's very, very light. There's not a whole lot of, interest in the story. Like the dev is clearly making a whole lot of cat puns. There's a lot of very cutesy dialogue. I think even the font choice they've taken from Peggle, or at least it seems similar in that regard. The characters are very, what's the word? Tongue-in-cheek. It's very silly. The whole thing is very, very silly. It's very self-aware. And with that being said, I lost my train of thought. Hold on. What was I just saying? We're talking about. Oh man, help me out here, chat. What did I just? It is cool particles, isn't it? There is a lot of sparkles on the screen for sure. What was I just talking about, bro? It was. Oh, you know what? I got my notes right here. Oh, right. Okay. So, what I was saying was this. So there's two modes, right? There's the mission mode, and then there's standard play, or free play, I guess you could say. Free play / standard play is this kind of Zen take on Solitaire, right? It's just the Solitaire game of Space Cat Solitaire, but it's just presented how it is. It's just there on the board, and you play it. This that you're seeing right here, this is the onboarding part. This is the tutorial, but it's also the mission-based kind of part of the game. And the mission-based part of the game walks you through every single new thing that's happening, but it also intersperses storytelling with these little parts of gameplay. And it's really cool because to me it feels purposeful. It feels like, again, this is the tutorial that we're seeing right here, but later on in the game you have just, it feels a lot like Peggle. You have modes of storytelling that goes ebbs and flows. And then when we do a little bit of storytelling, then we dip into the gameplay, and the gameplay is just your regular gameplay, except there's a little differences in there. For example, you have one part where you introduce cosmic cards. You have another part where you introduce meteorite cards, and I believe you're trying to get more, not necessarily upgrades, but differences in the game as you go forward. There's only 3 missions as of right now, or at least as of I've seen on the demo and the playtest version. There is a link in the description as far as I remember, if I put it there, to play this game. So at this moment, there is only 3 missions available in the demo, but I believe the missions will continue forward with that type of gameplay. But I think that's where my kind of boredom came from, was when I was playing this game, it felt like I was going toward this mission type of thing, and that was keeping me engaged. But when I went back to the free play, it felt boring. It felt like it wasn't going anywhere. It felt like as if I was playing Peggle without like the neat, what would you call it? The neat powers, from your people, from your characters. And that's how it felt to me, and it was very strange. And so this was what was kind of weird to me, was that it feels like this game was meant to be, or there's 2 different ways. It feels like the game might have been an evolution on the genre. It feels like that's what I thought it was when I started playing the game. And I think I got a little bit of disappointment when I was playing it because of that reason. What I mean by evolution of the genre is if you think about like Balatro or another game called Forbidden Solitaire, which I've never played. But Balatro has this kind of thing, right? Where Balatro has, it's like a reinvention of poker, right? You have poker hands, and as you play your poker hands, it's not just regular poker. You have these modifiers that are modifying all of the values, and you're trying to get as many points as you can, and you have this kind of strategies that are involved, and your modifiers. You have holographic cards, you have buffs and nerfs and everything, just all different kinds of things that you can do that you could never do in regular poker. And that was the weird thing that was really interesting in Balatro, was something that you could create this kind of new world that doesn't exist in reality. Whereas in Space Cat Solitaire, you can literally play this game in Tabletop Simulator. So let me bring that up right quick right here. So this is me. This is me setting up Space Cat Solitaire in Tabletop Simulator. And all I did was I had 3 suits rather than 2 suits. I'm using one of the suits as a stand-in for the cosmic cards. So I'm actually 1 card short because I don't have a 0. But that's what this game is, right? That's literally what's happening here. Is I'm playing Space Cat Solitaire now, but with real cards. Now, that's not a bad thing, right? I won't say that's a bad thing. Let's go back here. Space Cat Solitaire, there we go. It's not a bad thing. What I'm getting at here is my expectations as a player going into a game like this. When I see this game on Steam, I imagine what I'm going to get is some sort of evolution of Solitaire. I'm not saying that, again, it's not bad that this game doesn't have that. Not every game needs to be Balatro. Not every game needs to be this evolution on the genre. But it was my expectation going into this game that it was going to be something a little bit different and not necessarily just another Solitaire game. And that's totally fine if it was. But I'm trying to understand, why have so much detail in the space? Why have so much? Why dress it up with cats? Why have it Space Cat Solitaire? Why have all these things? Why create a new suit and cosmic cards and everything? What is it about this other stuff that makes this game, that much more it? Why have it so unique? If we're not evolving on the genre, what is it that you're trying to achieve here? And so that's what I'm trying to understand while I was playing the game. And it was something that I was fighting with while I was playing it. I just didn't understand why I was playing the game. Because when I play a game like this, if I play any kind of solitaire game, I'm usually drawing on some sort of nostalgia factor, right? When I'm playing like a Klondike Solitaire on my phone or something, just, waiting at the dentist office, for example, it's drawing on that kind of, mindset that I had when I was a kid. That I was playing Klondike Solitaire as a kid, and I know how to play it, and so it's kind of second nature. So I take out my phone and I start playing it because it's just second nature. Now I have other types of solitaire games, and sure, I'll play those. I'll get engaged with them. For example, I had just played Free Cell not too long ago for the first time, and Free Cell is really interesting and it's fun, but it's just a card game. That's all it was, right? So I played it for a little bit and then I left it. And I'm probably not the audience here. I'm not the type of person to want to go all in on a solitaire game. That's just not who I am. But it was interesting having that kind of mix of expectations of what I was going to get in the game, thinking that it was going to be an evolution on mechanics, and it wasn't that. So, that being said, I'm going to go to the comments right now, and we'll see what you guys had to say. What we got here, we have SJN Comics. We had Any Place But Here. We have JMA Field, J Matfield. Making games is interesting to me because you can craft experiences that can't exist in reality, but a card game like this does exist in reality. Not to be too critical. That's exactly where I was going. That's exactly what I was going. Exactly it, SJN Comics. That's it. Another person says, I prefer games which tug on your emotions in some way, but if I'm on solitaire, can be played without. But if I'm in solitaire, perhaps can be played without caring if you have to abandon it suddenly on the phone. Yeah, for sure. For a game to have this kind of, emotional tug on you, I think is a little odd to play into like a game that's meant for a casual play, for sure. Yeah, I would say that. Let's go into the dev's intentions here. So, of course, as you know, every time that a person submits a game to me, I ask them some questions and they answer them. So let's get into the questions here. The first question that I asked was, what were you hoping that the player would feel while playing your game? Their answer was, during gameplay, I want the player to feel a sense of delight, calm enjoyment by simply having the game open. The experience is meant to be meditative, especially when solving more difficult puzzles. I want the player to feel a sense of reward and accomplishment. I want the player to feel like each deal is a unique challenge for their wits. Question number 2 was, why did you choose this experience? This is a very important question, I would say. Their answer was, Solitaire was a knowable space for my first game, but I didn't want to just recreate old, boring, luck-based Solitaire. I wanted to create an experience where the player has agency, and that every deal felt like a fresh new challenge. I also wanted to evoke an experience that reminded me of playing card games on Pogo.com back in the day. Pogo games always had a theming and modifications to the original formulas to make them feel like they were the premier version of said game. I want to create that premier version of Solitaire. That's a great answer, I would say. My last question was, what were there specific moments, mechanics, or ideas that you built around that emotional goal? Their answer was pretty short. They said the tutorials were I'm not reading this correctly. The tutorials were where I hoped a lot of those moments of, oh, this isn't your usual Solitaire game comes from. The introduction of new mechanics being unlocked and explained through story mode. Sorry, my attention's drifting. The introduction of new mechanics being unlocked and explained through story mode is what you're doing. What you're doing felt like it was connected to the world that you're playing in. Okay, I think I understand what you said there. The emotional pull comes from that story part. Okay, so I'll have to read that out differently. Anyway, okay, so those are the answers to my questions there. And one of the things that I kept thinking about when I read that the first time was that premiere version of the game. So I have played Pogo games also. When I was a kid, I always played those free online flash games all the time. And I went back to play some of those just to see what this person was talking about. And they had talked about, they said they didn't say anything specific, but they said, the premiere version of the game is what it felt like. And so one of those games was First Class Solitaire. First Class Solitaire is a game that was on Pogo that was just a Klondike Solitaire game, and that's all it was. But what was interesting about it was that it was very juicy. It had very good graphics and, for the time. And the mechanics that were involved were a little different. It was just regular Klondike Solitaire, except you could have these gold cards that were every now and then that would represent a suit. And if you match that suit, then you have a lot of points. So a very juicy version of Klondike Solitaire. And I played that game and I was like, oh yeah, I could see as a kid playing that game and being like, wow, I love this, right? If you were to play Klondike Solitaire on Windows 98, like I said, or 95 back in the day, I don't know if it was for 95, but when you would play it back in the day, if you went to someone else's house, or someone else, you had a different computer and they're running just a different operating system, the thing that you could do is go online and still play Klondike Solitaire, but just in a different way. And so in this case, you would go to Pogo and then play something like First Class Solitaire. And in your mind, I think what you're doing is you're trying to connect that back to nostalgia. And this is the thing that I want to bring back to Space Cat Solitaire, is that when you're playing Space Cat Solitaire, you're not connecting back to any kind of nostalgia, right? Space Cat Solitaire is a brand new Solitaire game. It's completely different than anything that I've seen. I mean, the closest that I could say is kind of like Free Cell, but this game isn't, it's a different game. It just has its own rules and there's everything about it that's different. So when I see you saying something like, I want to make the premiere version of the game, what I see is that you're trying to take a game that exists in someone else's mind and making it really, really, really good. And I'm trying to think of like, well, wait, what's that thing that's in my mind that you're taking to make really good and really juicy and really premiere. I don't know what that is because I've never played Space Cat Solitaire before. So this is clearly a brand new thing. And for me, that feels like a missing link. That feels like I'm like my childhood that you're building on doesn't exist. That's what I'm feeling here, at least in the standard play. In the missions, I feel like it's completely different. And that's what I wanted to talk about here was those two audiences that I feel like that you're playing here for. The the audiences that I see here are two people. There's the person who really, really likes solitaire games and they want to play a new solitaire game that isn't one of the 200 plus solitaire games that exist, right? Those ones they've already played, they want something new, they find your game, boom, they got it, that's perfect. Then there's a second person that wants to play a game that feels like solitaire, but is kind of, interspersed with something more interesting. Those are the people that play, like Balatro or Forbidden Solitaire or any of those other types of evolutions of classic card games, right? Something that builds on those. And I think you do that with your mission-based games, right? When you have, when you have these cosmic cards, these extra suits, when you have these meteorite cards are interesting in here where they just block you and you can play them and they don't exist in reality. So that's pretty cool. But that's what I would say is your two different audiences here. And you're kind of, you're not necessarily mixing them together, but I don't know where your focus is here. I don't know if your focus is to have this main story where you're trying to push a bunch of different types of things, because it really does feel like this game, it's structured kind of like a roguelike where you enter each random challenge, or I guess it's not random. So I guess it's not even really a roguelike either, but you have each challenge, each deal that you're given is just a deal of cards, and you have to play it, and you have to complete this little puzzle that's given to you. And then once you do, then you get something in return, and it's something that then increases the challenge going forward. And it's interesting because it really, again, reminds me of Peggle, where you're going into that kind of, we do this kind of thing, and then we have an upgrade or we have some sort of thing that modifies the gameplay going forward. But it's still just that same type of gameplay that we come back to. It's just a little bit modified over and over and over. But because there's only 3 missions right now, it feels like I don't know if that's necessarily the place that we're going toward. And also because they're called missions is a little strange to me, because it feels like they're kind of optional. Like there's an optional narrative that you can go towards. So that's why I feel like there's 2 different types of audiences that you're playing for here. One that feels like it's nostalgia for people that just like solitaire, and one that's for people that want solitaire but want something a little extra. But I don't feel like that's getting enough of the extra stuff in there. So that is my spiel on this game. And that's how I feel about it. So that's all I got at the moment. Let's go back to the chat here. What do we got here? We have HROR Wolf says hello. Hello. Interesting self-paced games are not that common. That's very refreshing. Yeah, that is one thing that I definitely took out of this game for sure, was that it was something that I don't see a whole lot. So that was pretty cool. Another person said, I prefer playing card games in real life and feel human emotions. Yeah. Oh, I like this. I wanted to say that I liked this Space Cat, what do you call it, computer that was Nyan Cat. I thought that was fun. Yeah, the game it is what it is. I wish there was more to it. That's all I keep coming to. I would like to try to play it on here, but the game honestly it's so slow when you're playing it. There's not a whole lot of back and forth that I could do. Although I could talk over my gameplay, which is a lot easier for something like this. So yeah, that is pretty much all I got going on here. Thank you so much, you guys. Do you have any other comments or questions? This is again another short stream. All these streams are short. You know how it goes. I do wish there was more, because I like that they have these upgrades in here that come up every now and then. There are these cards that come up and it says upgrade, and you do something with it. And I felt like that's like like a roguelike element, you know, and I really like that. I thought that's what this game was going to be when I played it. And maybe that's my own fault for having that kind of expectation, but I like that idea where we have a roguelike element that we can then do stuff with. I think that's a lot of fun. That is everything I have. I believe we are all done here. I like the art. Yeah, the art is pretty sick. I really like the juice in this game quite a lot. Quite a lot. The the puns in here are just so dopey and cute and very I don't know, they're almost over the top. That's why also another thing that kind of reminded me of Peggle is that over the top being like it feels like Lisa Frank, you know what I mean? If you know what that world is, it feels very much like it's not really talking to anyone in particular. Like you're not really, it's like an aesthetic all its own. It's like that super cute type of aesthetic that you know we talk in W's. You know what I mean? Like we're doing baby talk all the time. It has puns that are just not clever. You know, they're really funny. I do like that kind of stuff. I think it's pretty silly. Okay, y'all. That is everything that I have to say today. So I appreciate you all joining me for today, and I will get this edited into a video that makes a lot more sense. So I'll talk to you guys later. Peace out.